Welcome everyone. It's episode 6 of PeopleQ with PeopleQ, and as you can see, I'm pretty excited. I have Saria sitting next to me today in the office.
I know. I can't believe that we're able to sort of
touch each other. That hasn't happened for a few years.
Absolutely. I know. I'm eyeballing you.
I know, right? It feels good to eyeball someone after being virtual for so long. Saria, what are we chatting about today?
Yeah, so in this episode, we thought that we would unpack high performance and in particular high performance culture, and then also discussing how to get to, I guess, the state of thriving or feeling like, you know, yourself and your team are thriving. But I guess for those, for our viewers and those playing at home, and we were talking about this earlier, what is high performance? Maybe we could unpack that, Mel. What do you think? Or can you share what that means?
Yeah. Look, we only have a few minutes, so we're not going to go into too much of a deep level detail or a dive into it. But I think, you know, we were having a fairly robust discussion before about organisations that overperform their targets, and does that mean that they're high performing? And not necessarily, that's just really one component of it. But what we normally find with high performing organisations, and let me just go back to it, the reason why not necessarily is because, you know, if they're a monopoly or if they've been sitting in that, you know, key position, number one position for a number of years, it's kind of much easier to manage what you've got rather than grow and be the competitor that's sort of coming up in the background to achieve the same level of performance. So performance is not necessarily an indicator that you are high performing, but it is one of them. The other elements that you would look at, and this is what the research tells us as well, is this idea that there is strong connection between all team members, that there is, you know, a high level of trust that exists between team members and with leadership and between other teams as well. And I often like to think of it as, you know, everyone is connected like a matrix throughout the organisation. But communication is always also like really open, it's inclusive, it's transparent. People feel like there's authenticity in the way that leaders communicate messages and communicate direction in the organisation. A lot of this then results in things like more collaboration occurring, you know, probably better problem solving, a bit more innovation, more focus on the customer. And as a result of this, you know, employees feel more satisfied with their roles, they're a bit more motivated as well and engaged with the organisation. I think the other element as well is this idea that the organisation and the work that you're doing is meaningful and is making a real contribution. So it's the results plus all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we were having a deep discussion offline about it. But no, you completely agree, Mel. You have to have all elements to be a high performing team. So with that being said then, like how do we describe thriving to our audience?
Yeah, so, you know, thriving is relatively new in terms of research. If you want to look at research and be really quite prescriptive about what thriving is. And so, you know, I guess a lot of the elements of thriving do therefore come from this idea of positive psychology and this idea that as humans we can flourish. And so if you think about that, if you think about being in an organization thriving, I see it as kind of the next level on from high performance. And it has this element of people feel energized. And with that level of energy, always, like, if you think about it, when I say the word energized, you kind of want to sit up. And so with that comes this idea that there's growth and that there's also forward momentum, not just from an organizational perspective, but also from a personal perspective. So a high performance culture, for example, might create over the long term people who burn out, whereas a thriving organisation considers all those elements to help people maintain their resilience and that level of energy to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Saria, I was going to ask you, I know that you've had the privilege of working in high performing teams and also leading high performing teams. And also realizing that high performance isn't static. It kind of goes up and down like a yo-yo. But I wonder if you could share with our audience a tip around what they might be able to do to help cultivate this high performance culture.
Yeah, thanks, Mel. And yeah, I have led lots of different teams in my career. And you're right, it is always static. There's ebbs and flows. You've got, you know, people moving on, and you've got newcomers joining the team, and that always changes up the dynamic. But I would say my biggest tip, and I think I've said this in potentially some other of our episodes, but connection.
Yeah.
For me,
I love it.
That by far is the biggest tip that I can share. And understanding what motivates each of your individuals in your team, and putting together some goals, personal goals, but also team goals that all align to the strategic goals of the organisation. So I think having that alignment with goals will help to, as Mel described earlier, to create that momentum and that feeling of thriving. Yeah. And again, you know, I know Mel, I don't want to take one of your tips away.
No, you can take the things you want. They're not mine.
But I guess, you know, having the goals is the first part, but then also making sure that you're able to sustain that effort with enough downtime, and really thinking about health and well-being and those other elements that help us feel energized. Because I've been there before, where you work really hard and you feel like, yep, I'm a high performer. Yeah. But at the end of it, you might feel really drained or burnt out. So, you know, actually on reflection, that wasn't really a great example of high performance. So really, when you look at thriving, it's about being able to find a way to maintain your levels of energy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I can really resonate and relate to this idea of burning out. And it doesn't necessarily happen immediately. It's over a long period of time, and it's different for everyone. But that thriving really helps you understand how to build resilience and maintain energy and balance so you don't get to that point. You know, I think the other thing that kind of circles for me in my thoughts is, you know, why would anyone care about creating a high-performing culture? And there's a lot of research and data that tells you it's actually really good for business. And it's good for business from a numbers perspective, from a productivity perspective, from a financial perspective, from a profitability perspective, and from a return on investment perspective. But for me, the most important element, and I think, you know, this is what I would take away as an employer, it's about the goodness that you're creating. If you create a great place to work and people come there and they experience that, you've created a little bit of goodness in the world, haven't you? And I think that idea of contributing goodness far outweighs everything else.
Absolutely. And you'll have, you know, happier and engaged employees who are going to promote your business. And again, that's only going to multiply your profitability, etc. So, you know, I often hear that culture's a very fluffy thing to work on, but there's actually some real, you know, real benefits financially for you to focus on, you know, uplifting your culture.
So the next few episodes, we're going to continue to talk a little bit more about high-performing cultures and sharing a few more tips with you, but also we're going to unpack a little bit more a thriving culture and talk a little bit more about well-being and resilience. So from us for now, bye.